Hello everybody. What I'd like to talk about in this video is how I make the handpiece for the homemade hand engraving machine. So what I'm going to do in this video is go over the materials and the tools that you'll need to make this, and some alternative methods of making these parts. And then in the next video I'll make one on the lathe. But this video we're going to talk about the pieces to this thing, so let's get started. First thing I'm going to do here is take it apart, and we'll look at all the parts. It's the handle. The handle's made out of aluminum. I tend to use 7075 T6 because the 6000 series seems a little too soft and gummy for me. I like the 7075. And handle. This is the nut. Jamb nut. Oops. Here's the piston and the spring, the barrel, and the quick change tool holder. And that's all there is to this thing. We'll start with the barrel. That's where I usually start when I machine. When I machine these, I start with the threads, because I have been known on occasions to mess the threads up when I single point. And what I mean by single point is I cut these on the lathe with a single tool, and it cuts the threads. It's called single pointing. If you have a lathe and you've done this stuff, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't worry about it. We'll get to that later. So what I got is this is 304 stainless steel. I've made them out of brass and aluma bronze, and I've made them out of different materials, but everybody seems to like the stainless steel, so I use a 304 stainless steel that I get from the local metal supplier here in town. And I think I bought a little over 8 feet last time. Just had them cut it in half so I could get it in the car. So I probably got a little over 8 feet of it for the next go round. And in the aluminum, these were 1" 063, and I made these handles with that material because that's what I had. I had a chunk of it laying here in the shop, so that's what I decided to use. This latest material I just bought, I went with 1 1/4 inches. Gives me a little bit more on the diameter in case I want to do like a traditional type handle, or just change the style up some. So I went with 2 1/2. Now you can buy this stuff on eBay, or you can check around, see if you have a metal supplier in town. So usually the first thing I do is I cut the threads. That way, if I mess the threads up and I don't like something goes wrong, I can just cut it off, pull the bar out, and keep on going. If I cut them all to 2" 1/60, whatever the length I decide, and then I mess a thread up or mess something up, I lose the whole length. So, just the way I do things. Now, there's another way you can do this. If you don't want to single point a thread or try to run a die over it, you can go to the hardware store and buy a 1/2 by 2 1/2 stainless steel bolt with the 1/2 20 thread already cut on it. What I do with that is I cut the head off, and then I cut the threads down some so there's not as much thread length. I'm shortening that thread up so it's a little bit closer to what I've got here. Now as you see, the thread runs a little bit past. You can always clean that up if you want to groove it. Like I put a thread relief on the ones that I thread. So you could come back in and you could put a thread relief here. And that would... and you'd have a bolt that almost looks identical to what I've already got here, to the barrel. So there's a shortcut for you. Now these bolts aren't cheap. They cost about $3.75 a piece at Menards, but if you don't want to cut the threads, that's already saved you that operation right there, so it may be well worth it for you. And you can also, what I'm going to show in a video, maybe not the video after next, somewhere down the line, is that you can make these on a drill press. Here's a barrel that's made out of brass, but this can be put into a V block, and now it can be put on. You find your center drill it, put it on a drill press, and drill it out. You don't need a lathe to make these things. Having a lathe makes it easy, but this can be made on a drill press, and I'll show you how. So for now, there's a nice little shortcut right there that can get you started. Now as far as this tip on the end, I mill it out. If you have a mill, you just mill it out. Leave 0.90 to a 1/10 of an inch wide by 1/10 of an inch tall. It's perfect. And then that gives you the 750 from here to the center of your vent hole. Now, if you don't have a mill, you can sneak up on this by chucking it up, say in a vise, and taking a hacksaw and just cutting, you know, just a little less than a 1/10 of an inch deep with a hacksaw. So you could hacksaw most of that away by hand and then finish it with a file. So you can get that little locator tip, and that's what locates your quick change tool holder and kind of holds it in place. It doesn't have to be perfect. If there's a lot of slop in it, like this one, it's got quite a bit of play in it, you're not going to notice it. But you want it to stay fairly close. Anyway, let's get back to drilling it out. I drill these out. I use a drill that's slightly undersized. If it's slightly undersized, this is drilled out or reamed to 3-inch or 0.375. So I use a drill that's 10 thousandths, like a 360 something drill or whatever, something that's a little undersized, and then I clean it up with the reamer. Now if you have a good sharp drill and you don't have reamers, you can get by with just drilling it out. Somewhere between 0.375 to 0.350 is fine. And a good sharp drill, you'll still have enough of a surface finish in there that it'll work on both the 375 to 0.375 or the 1/4 inch hole. You can get by with just a drill. I prefer to ream it because you get a much better finish. Now, after this tip is cut, you want to locate these vent holes at 750. And I just use the very end of my quick change tool holder to locate that hole. Because I want that hole that when this is in there, that quick change, I don't know if you can see that or not, but that quick change tool holder is right in the middle of that vent hole. That's where I want it. Now when I drill or ream, or both, this 375 to 350, whatever you decide to use, when I ream that out, I want that reamer to go right to the bottom of that hole. That's where I want it. That's as deep as I want it. And the dimensions are on the blueprints. Because if it goes past that hole, your piston can go past the vent holes. And if that piston totally covers that vent hole, it'll hang up. So that's why I have this little end on it, or a tit on the end of it that I've turned. It's only 0.25, but between the location of the quick change tool holder and where this piston is going to ride, I don't know if you can see that, they're both, I mean, they meet at the center of that hole. And that's where you want it, because if that goes past, it can hang up. But if you can't hardly see it, but there's enough clearance there that this one won't hang up, even if it's pushed the end out. And especially if the tip is all the way against the face of this of the barrel. That'll keep it in the center of the hole and it'll never stall out. So that's a good place. That's where you want your vent holes, and they're easily picked up. I use a 1/8 drill, put a little Dykem or magic marker on there, put my quick change tool holder up against the face, and then I'll take a scribe and I'll mark that center position right there. And then I can drill a 1/8. I'll drill it clean through, turn it 90, drill the other hole clean through. And I got 4 vent holes in the right place. And with any luck, I didn't drill that those 4 holes are going to be right there at the bottom of that 375, 350, 375 hole, whatever you decide to go with. So that's where you want that located. Let's see, is there any more I can say about this? I don't think so. So let's move on to the nut. The nut is what I use as a jamb nut to hold the handle in place. Once you get it set to where it's running, you got it tuned and it's running the way you like it, this kind of jams the two together. So what you want to use for your jamb nut, now you can make one if you've got a lathe, by all means, you know, do what you like. But the easiest way to make this is while you're at the hardware store picking up that stainless steel bolt, that 1/2-20 thread by 2.5 inch grip length, you can pick up a nut to go with it. Stainless steel nut, 1/2-20, hex nut, fine thread, and this is also a stainless steel. And with that, you screw the nut on there and you can turn it in place. I put like an 8 to 10 degree angle on it to give it that profile. That's probably an 8 right there, somewhere between 8 and 10 degrees. I also do a little undercut in here, maybe 1/10 of an inch deep or so. Doesn't have to be too deep, about 1/10 of an inch deep, a little larger than the 1/2 inch diameter, and it'll go all the way down and then some. It just goes down a little farther on the threads when I put a little undercut in there. You don't have to do that. I do it just so it screws on a little farther. Now, Okay, what else we got here? Okay, there's the barrel and the nut. Now we'll get into the handle. The handle, you're gonna have tap. You're gonna have to have at least a bottom tap, bare minimum, and that might be hard to work with unless you've got a good chamfer in this hole. You're gonna drill a 29/64 hole in this to run your tap in. Now the depth, I'm not going to get into the depths. All that stuff is on the blueprint that I can provide to anybody who wants one, and that'll tell you how deep it goes. But your bare minimum, you're going to need a tap. They're not real cheap, but you're going to have one. It doesn't have to be a half 20, but keep in mind that if you go like a half 13, which are a little more common, especially at the hardware store, you're not going to be able to get away with this 375 reamer. You're going to have to go to 350 because the threads on the 1/2 13 are going to be deeper. And right now, with the half 20 and a 0.375 inside diameter on the cylinder bore here, there's probably a 20 thousandths wall thickness left between the bottom of the threads and the inside of the wall. So it's not a lot, but it's, you know, it's substantial. But now if you go to the like I said, the half 13, it's going to be a deeper thread, and I think you'd be pushing your luck trying to shove a 375 down in that hole without blowing out your threads. So I like, and besides, I like the half 20 because it gives you more adjustment. The finer the thread, the more fine adjustment you're going to have on the thing. Now this one has a fine spring adjustment with a little screw. I'm not going to get into that right now because this is all still experimental to me. It's probably not needed, but you are going to need this in order to make these. These two can be chucked up on a V-block and drilled out on a drill press if you don't have a lathe. So this whole thing can be made on a drill press, just going to take a little extra time. The radius on here, now you can do that by hand too, be it chucked up in a drill press or chucked up on a lathe. I use a radius cutter. Now, I made that out of a small what the heck is that thing called? Anyway, I made it so that I could cut these on the lathe without doing it by hand. But they can be done by hand. You can sneak up on them and you know, kind of turn different angles and then work it with a file, and you'll get it by hand. You don't have to have a radius turner, a ball turner, whatever you want to call it. Now the 45 degree, you got a 45 degree angle that the pipe, the air pipe from the compressor goes into, the 1/4 inch. And I cut these at 240, 238, 240, somewhere in there, so that this is kind of a press fit. You kind of got to shove it in the hole, but once it's in there, it stays pretty good. It ain't coming out unless you yank on that tube. So cut that at a 45 degree angle. You can come straight into the back. You know, I've done quite a few that were like that. Here's one of my earlier ones that I was doing, just straight in the back. And they still work. I mean, you can still work with it. But that's your choice. I seem to like it. Most people like it at a 45. I'll screw it all the way down. Onto my handpiece, and I'll look for my locator tip for the quick change tool holder. And I'll flip it over, and I'll put a mark up here with the with magic marker or something, so I know where I want to drill that hole. And then I'll set one of my vices up to 45 degrees. Put it in the vise and drill my 45 hole. If I've got it just right, it comes out, the edge of it's right at the center, and it's just like in the perfect spot. It's really not that difficult to do. I mean, you can almost eyeball it and get it close enough. That's how I pick up that 45. Let's see. Good pair of calipers are about all you're going to need for all your dimensions. For checking anything that you got, calipers. Gonna need something to measure this with. This is the best tool you can use, because then you can go, you know, down inside the barrel to the bottom of the hole and get an exact measurement. So calipers, definitely the tool of choice for this job. Alright, what else we got? Piston. Said I talked about it earlier, not covering up the vent hole. The piston is just under 375, so this is probably what, 372. So that gives it about 1/1000 all the way around. That's how much clearance is on this piston. And you don't want it too tight. 1/1000 is probably just fine. 1/1000. You could probably go to 373 and it would work fine. But you make these any size you want, as far as the weights you want. And I put this little cup in it so that the spring will fit down in there. That holds that spring dead center in that piston. And depending on how deep I drill that cup out, it gives me the weight, what weight I want. If I want it lighter, I'll just hog out more of that metal in there until it's the weight that I like. I make the quick change tool holders, but you can get on eBay and you can buy them by the fistfuls. They're not real cheap, but it just saves, if you don't, like say, if you don't have a lathe, that's going to save you the headache. What else? What else? That pretty much covers everything that I can think of right now. If you guys have any questions, you can leave me questions. I'll leave a link to Sean Hughes's YouTube channel. He's got a lot of good information on this. Excellent engraver. You need to watch his videos. He's pretty talented. And the next video I do, I'll make one of these barrels on the lathe, and I'll make some of the parts on the lathe, and then the video following that, we'll do it on a drill press for you guys that don't have access to a lathe, and see if we can't get you guys making these things. Alright, I think that's all I have for now. Like I said, if I forgot anything, please leave questions and I'll try to catch up in the next video when I make this barrel piece. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.